began swirling across Hollywood that the next James Bond movie could take an unexpected turn. Insiders close to the production claimed that Jeff Bezos' wife, Lauren Sanchez, was suddenly on the shortlist for a major role. Not just a cameo, but a fully developed character whose presence could shift the entire tone of the reboot. This was not an ordinary casting conversation. It was one woven into the complex web of business politics and high-profile connections that already surrounded Amazon, MGM. Ever since Bezos acquired the studio and began shaping its creative direction, industry veterans knew the franchise was at a crossroads. The old formula of tuxedos and martinis had to evolve for a new audience, but nobody expected a figure like Lauren to even be part of the discussion yet, behind closed-doors meetings. Her name surfaced again and again because of her unique blend of media-savvy global visibility and personal ties to the man whose company now effectively controlled the Bond brand to some. It was a marketing masterstroke, a way to inject modern glamour and intrigue into the franchise, while securing maximum publicity to others. It was a dangerous gamble, risking...
Whenever it first happened, I was with my sister's boyfriend who took us to Wimbledon, and he was like, I'm gonna go buy you a new skirt. Like, there's skirts, they sell them, and I was like, but this is my outfit, and I love my outfit, and I just kind of want to rock this. And then I said, like, okay, I can cry, because I like...
And every public outing Lauren made in the months leading up to the rumored announcement. And while no official word came from the production or from Bezos himself, the silence only fueled the mystery. Was this just a publicity fantasy, or was the Bond franchise about to take its boldest leap, yet into a world where the line between Hollywood fantasy and billionaire reality had never been thinner? And as each day passed...
It's just beginning. It is just beginning.
You are preaching to the choir
Yes,
right here. We love
so
you.
Many,
That's amazing.
It just gets better and better.
The two said...
Most enduring icons, according to a new report from OK Magazine, the buzz surrounding Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez took an unexpected Hollywood turn, as insiders whispered that Bezos was now quietly orchestrating a plan to make his wife a bona fide movie star, not just any role, not a blink. And you miss it cameo, but a prominent character in one of the most iconic franchises in cinema history, the next James Bond film. And as the details trickled out from those close to the couple, it became clear. This was not an idle conversation or a passing daydream. Bezos had reportedly set his mind on it. Insiders claimed he was fixed on the idea in the way only a man with his resources and determination could be fixed. The magazine quoted a Hollywood source saying, "Simply, he's obsessed. This isn't just fantasy casting. Jeff wants her on screen, period." The words hung in the air with the kind of weight that makes industry players sit up and listen, because when someone with Bezos' influence gets an idea in his head, the ripple effects can be felt from studio boardrooms to the smallest fan forums across the internet. And while some in Hollywood privately rolled their eyes, others recognized the raw potential in such a move. Lauren Sanchez was no stranger to public attention. She had carved out a career in media long before her marriage to Bezos, working as a television host, reporter, and producer. Her ability to command a room or a camera was undeniable, and her transformation from respected journalist to glamorous figure on the global stage had been chronicled in countless magazine spreads and paparazzi shots. But this was different. This was about entering the rarefied air of a major motion picture, one carrying the legacy of over 60 years of film history and the expectations of millions of fans worldwide for Bezos. The timing seemed almost too perfect. Amazon MGM was still recalibrating its direction for the Bond franchise after securing the rights, and there was a growing sense that the next installment would need to take risks to stay relevant in a cinematic landscape dominated by superhero blockbusters and streaming competition. What better way to generate global headlines than by placing the wife of one of the richest men on Earth directly into Bond's world? The move could redefine the marketing approach, pulling in audiences who might not have been traditional Bond watchers and driving streaming subscriptions through sheer curiosity alone. But such a bold step also carried enormous risk. The James Bond fandom was notoriously protective of its traditions. Debates over who should play Bond himself often raged for years online, and even minor casting decisions could ignite social media firestorms. The introduction of Lauren Sanchez into that world would inevitably divide opinion. There would be those who applauded the fresh energy and modern flair she could bring, and there would be others who dismissed it as blatant corporate influence over creative decisions. Yet, according to OK Magazine's sources, Bezos was unmoved by potential criticism. He believed in Lauren's talent, and more importantly, in her ability to hold her own on a set surrounded by seasoned actors. One insider reportedly described his vision not as stunt casting, but as strategic casting, pointing to her charisma. her on-camera, confidence, and her growing public profile as proof she could pull it off, and behind-the-scenes conversations were said to be ongoing between key decision-makers, with some suggesting that even if she did not land a starring role, there could be a way to integrate her into the film in a significant capacity, perhaps as an ally to Bond or as a mysterious figure whose allegiances are unclear. The beauty of such a role would be that it could be expanded or scaled back depending on how audiences responded. But to the people around Bezos, it seemed clear that he was aiming higher than just a fleeting appearance. He wanted a moment that would cement Lauren in the cinematic spotlight. And while official spokespeople for Amazon MGM and the Bond franchise offered no comment, the speculation only grew with every public outing Lauren made, especially those that hinted at a more glamorous or action-oriented image than her usual appearances. Some observers noted her recent fashion choices, her physical fitness routine, and her increasingly polished presence at high-profile events as signs that she might already be preparing for such a role. The internet did what it always does, dissecting every photograph, every interview, and every casual remark in search of clues. Whether those clues were real or imagined hardly mattered, because in the court of public opinion, the story had taken on a life of its own, and in many ways that was exactly the kind of buzz a production like Bond thrived on in Hollywood. Timing is everything, and for Bezos and Sanchez, the window of opportunity seemed wide open. The next Bond film was in the early stages of development. The studio was hungry for attention, and the global media landscape was primed for stories that blurred the lines between celebrity culture, business power, and film history. And for a couple, like Bezos and Sanchez, whose every move was already news, the idea of stepping into a fictional world as high-stakes and stylish as James Bond's was almost too fitting to ignore. And so as the rumors continued to swirl, fueled by leaks, whispers, and strategic silences, one question remained at the heart of it all. Was this simply a billionaire indulging a personal wish? Or was it the start of one of the most unexpected casting announcements in modern cinema history? And as the talk in Hollywood grew louder about Bezos's behind-the-scenes push to see Lauren Sanchez step into a major role in the James Bond universe, the speculation began to evolve from a curiosity into a full-scale industry discussion. Agents, producers, and casting directors suddenly found themselves fielding questions not about the next actor to play Bond, but about whether one of the most famous women in the billionaire orbit could convincingly inhabit the high-stakes, glamorous, and often dangerous world the franchise had built for over 6 decades. Some saw it as a power move, almost a public declaration that Bezos was not content to merely own the studio through Amazon MGM. He wanted to leave his personal stamp on one of the most valuable intellectual properties in cinema history, and Lauren herself became the focal point of endless debates, not only about her potential acting abilities, but about what her presence might symbolize for a franchise that had always carefully balanced tradition with reinvention to supporters. The idea of Lauren in a Bond movie represented an opportunity to push the character landscape into new territory. Her background as a pilot, her experience in front of the camera, her undeniable charisma, and her comfort under the kind of global spotlight few people could handle were seen as assets to skeptics. It was a sign that the franchise might be heading toward a more celebrity-driven direction, one where casting decisions were as much about media attention as they were about character fit. Whichever side of the debate people landed on, one fact became clear: this was not a rumor that would simply fade away each time Lauren appeared in public. It sparked fresh waves of online chatter and gossip column analysis. Her appearance at high-profile events became mini media storms, with fashion blogs analyzing her outfits for subtle nods to Bond style. Whether intentional or not, photographs of her arriving at Amazon MGM related gatherings were scrutinized for hints of closed-door meetings with key creative figures in the franchise. And as the media kept the story alive, the possibility of her casting began to feel less like a wild fantasy and more like something that could actually happen. Especially when you considered Bezos's well-documented history of seeing ambitious projects through from conception to execution. Insiders who spoke anonymously suggested that early conversations about Lauren's possible role were not centered around her playing a typical Bond girl. The franchise had been moving away from that outdated archetype for years. Instead, they imagined a role that would allow her to stand toe-to-toe with Bond, a character with her own agency, her own secrets, and her own narrative arc. One suggestion was that she could play a high-ranking intelligence official, someone who operates in the shadows, pulling strings and forcing Bond into difficult moral decisions. Another idea floated was casting her as a rival operative, perhaps even from an allied but competing agency, giving her a dynamic that could shift from adversary to ally, depending on the story's twists. Both options would allow her to bring elegance and authority to the screen, while also opening the door for action sequences that could showcase her athleticism and adventurous side qualities that people close to her say are authentic and not just for show. The strategic advantage of such a casting choice was obvious. Lauren's name alone would generate months of free publicity for the film. Every magazine cover, every television interview, and every social media post would be another wave of global marketing at virtually no extra cost to the studio. And while some in the creative community bristled at the notion of casting as a publicity stunt, others quietly admitted that the Bond franchise had always thrived on its ability to generate spectacle, both on and off the screen. Think of the global searches. For the next Bond actor, think of the iconic theme songs. Think of the decades of premiere events attended by royalty political leaders and Hollywood's elite. Adding Lauren Sanchez to that tradition could be seen as simply the next evolution in keeping Bond relevant to a new generation. But beyond the glitter of red carpets and the buzz of gossip, there was also a more personal angle to the story. Those who know Bezos say he genuinely believes in Lauren's ability to succeed at whatever she sets her mind to, and that this casting push was not simply about flexing influence, but about giving her the platform to prove herself in a space where she could surprise her critics. After all, Lauren had faced public skepticism before during her transition from journalist to high-profile public figure in the billionaire world. She had navigated intense media scrutiny while building a brand that blended glamour with a sense of adventure. Her piloting skills and her work on various media projects had shown a side of her that went beyond being someone's partner. And for Bezos, the chance to put that on display in one of the most watched films in the world might have been too tempting to pass up. Still, no official confirmation came from the Bond producers, and that silence was almost as strategic as any announcement could be, because as long as nothing was confirmed, the speculation could continue feeding on itself, generating coverage from tabloids to serious industry outlets. The lack of denial allowed both sides of the debate to keep building their cases, and in the meantime, Lauren continued to move through her public life, seemingly unfazed by the whirlwind her possible casting had unleashed. Whether she was quietly preparing for a role or simply living her life became part of the mystery. And in the world of James Bond, mystery has always been one of the most valuable currencies. And so the conversation rolled on fans, theorizing online, Hollywood insiders watching closely, and Jeff Bezos apparently holding fast to his vision of seeing Lauren step into the cinematic universe that has defined cool sophistication and high-stakes adventure for more than half a century, leaving everyone to wonder not if but when. The first undeniable clue would appear that the billionaire's wife was about to become part of spy film history. And as the days turned into weeks without any official announcement, the speculation around Lauren Sanchez and the next James Bond film began to weave itself into a larger narrative about power, influence, and the changing face of Hollywood. For decades, the Bond franchise had been shaped by the vision of its producers, directors, and writers. But now industry watchers were wondering aloud if the balance of creative control could be shifting toward a new kind of stakeholder, one whose leverage came not from a career in filmmaking, but from the vast reach of corporate ownership through Amazon, MGM. Jeff Bezos had more than just a financial stake in Bond. He had the ability to shape its future in ways few individual owners ever could, and his reported determination to see Lauren step into a prominent role was the clearest example yet of how that influence might manifest. For some, this was an exciting possibility, the idea that the franchise could be infused with new energy, a glamorous, high-profile personality who could appeal to audiences far beyond the traditional Bond fan base. For others, it was a warning sign, a reminder that in an era when billionaires are increasingly intertwined with the entertainment industry, the line between art and business is becoming harder to see. What made the story even more intriguing was the fact that Lauren herself seemed to be moving in a way that fueled rather than diffused the rumors. In recent months, she had been spotted at industry parties where Bond insiders were present, photographed in outfits that hinted at classic spy film elegance, and even seen visiting locations tied to past productions. Though none of these moments could be definitively linked to casting preparation, they provided the kind of tantalizing imagery that gossip sites and social media thrived on, and each time the story resurfaced, it seemed to pick up more traction, not less. There were whispers that test shoots or chemistry reads could be arranged, quietly away from public view, possibly using code names to keep details from leaking. But whether those whispers were grounded in fact, or just part of the growing myth around the casting, only added to the intrigue behind the scenes. The stakes for the next Bond film were higher than they had been in years. The last installment had closed a major chapter for the franchise, and the creative team was under pressure to reinvent the series, without losing what made it iconic. This meant new faces, fresh storytelling angles, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness to surprise the audience in ways they had not seen before. Lauren's involvement would certainly qualify as a surprise, and whether people loved or hated the idea, it would guarantee that everyone would have an opinion. And in the movie business, that kind of attention can be priceless. Still, the Bond brand had been meticulously curated over decades, and some veteran voices in the industry cautioned against allowing outside forces to influence casting decisions too heavily. They pointed out that while marketing value is important, the longevity of the franchise depended on the integrity of its characters and the quality of its storytelling. Yet the more the subject was debated, the more it became clear that Lauren Sanchez was not an ordinary candidate. She brought a combination of real-world experience and global recognition that few actresses could match. Her background as a helicopter pilot meant she was already comfortable in high-pressure environments that demanded precision and focus. Her years as a television personality gave her the ability to project confidence and connect with audiences, and her position alongside one of the most influential figures in technology and media meant she understood the complex intersection of public image and strategic branding. In other words, if she were to be cast in a Bond film, it would not just be as an actress, but as a figure who could embody both the glamour and the high-stakes intrigue that the franchise thrived on. In the absence of hard confirmation, fans took matters into their own hands, creating mock posters and fan trailers, imagining what Lauren's Bond debut might look like. Some depicted her as a sophisticated intelligence chief, others as a daring undercover operative in exotic locations, complete with high-tech gadgets and perfectly tailored evening gowns. These fan creations spread quickly across social media platforms, generating both excitement and criticism. And while the Bond producers maintained their trademark silence, some insiders quietly acknowledged that the attention was impossible to ignore. Every time the story trended, it reminded the wider public that a new Bond film was on the horizon and that it might break with tradition in a big way. Jeff Bezos, meanwhile, continued to play his role in the drama with characteristic restraint. Publicly, he said nothing, but privately, according to those close to him, he remained as committed as ever to the idea. The portrayal of his efforts in OK magazine as obsession was perhaps an exaggeration, but it captured the essence of his focus. He believed in Lauren's potential, and he saw this as the perfect moment for her to step into a new arena, one that could expand her career in unexpected directions. Whether the decision would ultimately be his to make was another matter entirely. The Bond franchise operated under a unique structure of creative control, one that had resisted external interference for decades. But Bezos was not just any outside force. He was the owner of the studio. And in Hollywood, ownership has a way of bending the rules. And so as award season approached, and the entertainment press prepared for another year of speculation about the next James Bond, the question of Lauren Sanchez's involvement refused to fade away. It had become more than a casting rumor. It was now a litmus test for the evolving relationship between money, power, and creative decision-making in the film industry. And as each day passed without resolution, the tension only grew, leaving audiences to wonder if the next time they saw Lauren on a red carpet, it would be not just as the partner of one of the world's most famous billionaires, but as a new face in the most famous spy franchise in cinematic history. And as the months of speculation swelled into a full-blown pop culture phenomenon, the Lauren Sanchez James Bond rumor had transformed from a quiet insider whisper to a headline that even people far removed from Hollywood could not escape. Whether you were a diehard Bond fan, a casual moviegoer, or someone who only glanced at celebrity news, the idea of the billionaire's wife stepping into one of cinema's most iconic universes had become part of the cultural conversation. And that was perhaps the most telling sign that Jeff Bezos' quiet push had already succeeded in one important way. The story had legs, it refused to fade. And in the film industry, attention is the currency that fuels momentum. From London to Los Angeles, conversations about the next 007 installment no longer began with who will play Bond, but with will Lauren be in it? And if so, what role could she possibly take? The theories were endless. Some imagined her as a sleek intelligence mastermind, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Others saw her as a mysterious new antagonist, forcing Bond into moral territory the series had never explored. and still others believed she could play a layered ally whose loyalty would remain in question until the final frame. Every theory sparked arguments and debates online, but together they did something invaluable. They kept Bond in the headlines during a lull between productions, and for Lauren, the public intrigue created an unexpected side effect. It reshaped her image in ways no traditional publicity campaign could. She was no longer framed solely as Bezos' partner. She was being discussed as a potential creative force, someone who could step into a demanding role under immense scrutiny and possibly redefine what audiences expected from a Bond-leading lady or supporting figure. Her past work in television and aviation suddenly took on new resonance, as fans began to imagine how those real-world skills could translate into a character who could believably share the screen with 007. The fact that she had lived much of her recent life under the relentless glare of the paparazzi only added to her mystique, because in the Bond universe, every character worth remembering is cloaked in layers of intrigue, glamour, and unpredictability. Meanwhile, inside the industry, the conversation took a more strategic tone. Producers knew that attaching Lauren to the project, even in a limited capacity, would send shockwaves through the marketing cycle, generating millions in earned media before a single frame was shot. And in an era when studios are competing for attention in an oversaturated market, that kind of built-in buzz is gold. But there was also the matter of legacy. The Bond franchise has always walked a careful line between modernizing and preserving its heritage. Too drastic a change, and the core fan base could revolt. Too little evolution, and the series risks irrelevance. The challenge for decision-makers was to find a role that could make Lauren's presence feel organic and essential, rather than forced, a role that would allow her to surprise the skeptics, while giving supporters exactly what they wanted, a fresh injection of glamour and edge. As the silence from official channels dragged on, Jeff Bezos' resolve appeared unshaken. Those close to him described a man who was not lobbying in public, but quietly aligning the pieces behind the scenes, using his access and influence to keep the possibility alive. And in Hollywood, persistence often matters as much as talent or timing. The OK magazine report had called him obsessed, and while that word carried tabloid drama, it was not entirely wrong. Once Bezos set a goal, history suggested he would pursue it relentlessly. And he had the resources to wait out any resistance. Timing, after all, could change everything. A role might not materialize for the next film, but the one after could be shaped with her in mind, and that possibility kept the embers glowing long after the initial rumor broke. And so the stage was set for one of two endings. Either the story would culminate in a blockbuster reveal that Lauren Sanchez was officially part of the James Bond legacy, or it would remain one of Hollywood's most tantalizing what-ifs, a moment when the worlds of billionaires and secret agents almost collided. But even if the latter came to pass, the impact of the rumor would remain. It had already shifted perceptions about Lauren and about the influence of power players like Bezos in shaping the future of beloved franchises. It had shown that in the modern entertainment ecosystem, a single strategic whisper could snowball into a global talking point. And it had proved that the line between real-world intrigue and on-screen drama was thinner than ever. And so the question lingered as fans and critics alike scanned news feeds for any hint of confirmation. When the lights go down on the next Bond premiere and the first scene flickers onto the screen, will we see a familiar billionaire's wife step into the frame with the poise and presence of someone who was never just along for the ride? Or will her role remain off-screen, a legend that exists only in the space where Hollywood dreams? And real-life power plays meet, leaving audiences forever wondering just how close the world came to seeing Lauren Sanchez become part of spy film history.
This video covers legal allegations in a news context. All claims are from official filings and no guilt is implied until proven in court. Please keep all discussions
marked by its emotional depth and human stakes. As more developed